This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. Hi, this is Joe Rabil. Going to give you a stock market update for Friday morning. We want to go through these market conditions. There's been some changes that have taken place that are definitely worth noting. The bulls and bears are flipping back and forth with the market. So we want to be aware of that and kind of where we're situated from that standpoint. And then we want to look at some of the changes with respect to volatility before we get into the trends. So let's go ahead and get going with this. My book can be found on rabilstockresearch.com/book. If you want to learn how to trade in multiple timeframes using MACD and ADX. Okay, let's go through the market conditions here. We've got an increase in bullishness. We went from 31%. The difference between the bulls and the bears went from 31% to 39%. Again, I use the Investors Intelligence sentiment survey, and I've been using it for a very long time. So this thing dropped down. I think it went from around 48 down to something like 29 or 28, something like that. It was a pretty big drop. Even though it didn't get really, really low, when you have a big drop in a bull market, that's a bullish sign. So we've actually benefited from that. It was down off the bottom. So first off, we had a lot of bullishness here, and then we got a little too bearish here after a big 3-week drop. Now we're getting more bullish again. Now it isn't at the point where I would call it negative. It's kind of borderline. Last week we were kind of here, so it was a pretty big shift in the way this has taken place. Now we have worked our way back to overbought. The short-term RSI 5 for the S&P is now at 73, so I categorize that as a negative. So we're kind of moving these a little bit closer to the negative camp, although this could go another week before depending on how the market acts, because we might see more guys jump on board this and get more bullish. So we'll have to see how it plays out next week. In terms of the volatility, I'm going to show you in a minute. We're still negative on the weekly, but the daily shifted back to positive. I alluded to that last week as a possibility. We also shifted the daily back to positive on both the trend and the momentum. All right. So on balance, everything is still pretty bullish. We've got a little bit too much volatility on the weekly chart, and we're a little overbought on the weekly chart right now. All right. So let's go ahead and look at this. Now, keep in mind, this is a short-term indicator, but that's a pretty substantial divergence that's taking place in that window there, which is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-bar window, right? So from high to high is 8 bars. Anywhere around 8 to 12 tends to be the higher probability area to be on the lookout for divergence. So we could have divergence here, but it's only the potential for divergence, because if this keeps moving higher, this could ultimately confirm. So we don't pre-guess that. What we'd be looking for, and what I would do, is go down to the smaller time frame and look for some kind of a reversal to take place. Based on what's taken place there, look at how we've dropped on the volatility. The volatility has dropped substantially, and this made a pretty big jump over the course of a couple months, and now it's dropping off, and this is clearly turned down. So we could even have a little bit of volatility improvement or increase on the pullback, and I still don't think this is going to shift back to negative or neutral right now. It could. I mean, I guess if we had some pretty big bars, but right now I'm more inclined to believe that we're going to get a pullback that probably leads a little bit higher. I'll show that when we get into the individual trends. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So monthly chart had a pause. We were up for 5 months, and then we had a red bar, pause bar. Didn't shift anything, closed above the 4, but didn't really shift it downward, and now we're kind of moving back to the upside. The momentum signs are pretty good here, and green DI is clearly in charge and confirming now. On a weekly basis, we've got something a little bit more interesting taking place. Now, we never really shifted into a contraction phase because red did not make a higher high, okay? Now, green did, but the sellers really never jumped on this and created a true reversal, or what I would consider to be a true contraction pattern. Now, what's more interesting to me is what's going on with the MACD. we have come down, we had overrun. Now, a lot of times what you do is you come down enough that this kind of works its way and channels a little bit before it turns back up. That is only shown on this bar here on the daily, which I'll show you in a second. But if you notice the way this played out now, we're at a new high, and this is still below the signal line. Now, again, this is only potential divergence. This is not divergence. Divergence is we would have to say, make this come down, maybe form a pivot high, right, and have a bad day. And then I would say, okay, we have divergence in place. But if this keeps going, this ultimately could confirm to the upside. So don't jump the gun on this. It's not worth doing that and trying to pre-guess. And I'm going to explain why. When we look at the daily chart, we're creating a lot of error between price and the 18. That's usually a sign of strength, right? When we got this daylight to the upside, you can that means you can pull back and you're not breaking down. You're just pulling back to the line, right? We could have a reversion pattern, and that all that is just a normalized pullback back to the moving average. We've got pretty good action in MACD, and green DI is breaking out. So if we draw this horizontal line across, you can see you're taking out the red from the last decline phase. So we've got confirmation on both of those, and that's why I shifted both the momentum and the trend back to the upside, especially now that the moving average, the 18, has crossed back above the 40. But in the near term, I think we could use some kind of a pullback. Market, had kind of a small range day, low volume, right? We're due for some kind of a retracement being this far away from the 18 day. You can move away from the 18 week and stay above it in the 18 month, but the daily chart, you tend to get pullbacks a little bit more often, right? You don't typically have this go on and on and on. So we should be on the lookout for some kind of a little retracement. It doesn't have to be the end of the world, but I actually think it would be really healthy. Now, my reasoning for not being of the belief that we have this really, really high risk retracement coming, like a really hard down move, is what's going on the hourly. The hourly is clearly confirming this move. Strong up move, right? Now, we've had 3 of these peaks, right? So we have had a pretty good move. It's possible that we could have some kind of a counter move, which makes sense based on what I'm seeing on the daily, which would mean this could go and create an opposing trend trigger. But the fact is that this is incredibly strong. And I don't think I would be, based on the way this is acting, we would have to have some really strong new selling to come in to reverse this pattern. I think it's a lot more likely that we get an opposing trend pattern that's just a pullback towards the 18 day. So that's more inclined of what I'm looking for at this point. I don't see anything that's too disturbing right now. The only thing that is really the fly in the ointment in this setup is that the MACD isn't confirming. But I did want to point this out, and I mentioned this earlier. So when we get overrun, I'm not typically interested in the first move to the upside. So in this case, it moved up, and then it actually went inside the zone between the 18 and the 40, and then it acted like it was coming back out. Now remember, this is supposed to be a sell signal. Remember, the 18 crossed down below the 40. We went in the zone. We should be going to a new low here if things are bearish. But instead, it had one down bar, a little bit more, came down and tested this low, and then turned right back to the upside with a gap and got itself going, coming back up through this prior peak. So the way I look at it is this was the test that I was looking for on the weekly. Now, usually it's a little bit more well-defined on the weekly, but it doesn't always play out that way. It doesn't always have that big of a separation so you can see it on the weekly. Sometimes it just happens just like this. We kind of have to accept that, but I still think the next real buying opportunity is going to take place on an orderly pullback sometime over the next 2 or 3 days. That's what I would be watching for if I were trading this index. I think if you're looking at individual stocks, you can look, if you get entry in an individual stock, you can probably play that. Because the volatility is high on the weekly chart, I'd probably shy away from playing the monthly, weekly type pattern, like playing a longer term trade right now, unless it's an absolute perfect or it's something that is not really highly correlated to the market, mainly because this 18-month is sort of stretched. Not to say that we can't keep going, but it's not quite as good of a play, I don't think, as it is playing off the weekly and the daily. All right, that's the update for the week. Let me know if you have any questions.